Hey, and welcome to day 6 of Quantum Leap Experience. Oh, there is a lot going on, and I have a really great subject for you today. And it's going to be kind of like story time. I have a lot to, I feel like, talk about and get through. I thought there was a way I was going to have to talk about this stuff separately, but then I realised I've got a really nice link in with the experiment and what we're doing. So I'm going to try and be as succinct as possible, but this stuff is complicated and might not make sense at the beginning, but we'll see how we go on, right? But it's fun. This is what I live for, this stuff, and we'll get into it, right? So there's so many pieces also to this puzzle, trying to weave them all together to make it make sense. I'm going to do my best. Okay. Right, and also at the moment, I'm a little bit tired. I took ages to get to sleep last night, and then I had really vivid dreams the last 2 nights. This week is potent, it's very powerful. The Schumann resonance has been spiking off the charts. If you're not sure what that is or what it looks like, you can, in my stories on Instagram, I always post, well, quite often post a screenshot of what's happening with this Schumann resonance, so you can kind of keep track of it. And if you do feel like it's affecting you, then I sort of explain what's going on with that, and I have a whole podcast episode on the Schumann resonance and how that can affect you and all that kind of good stuff. So if you're feeling tired, dizzy, like you've got a cold, brain foggy, ringing in your ears, all that kind of good stuff is it's more than likely happening this week. We've got the solstice on Thursday, a full moon on Friday morning, and so there's a lot going on. It's a very potent, fertile time in the world, and I feel like this energy is sort of spiking in the lead up to this end of the week moment. So there's a lot going on, and we'll keep going. So part of this quantum leap experiment, I want to talk to you, and this is not technically, I know we've been sort of loosely following the Price Pritchard work from U Squared and his other book, but this, I don't remember it being in there, but we're going to add it in because I think it's important. Main character energy, right? I think it's so hard for a lot of us to feel like we are the main character in our stories and in our journeys, and quite often we are happy to take a back seat and sort of go along with whatever is happening or going on, or we don't feel like we can be that main character in our own journeys or in our own stories. So it's something, again, that it takes a minute to allow yourself, give yourself the permission to embrace your main character energy. And I think a lot of us online, we sort of, these influencers, we sort of follow them because they are actually living out their main character energy for the most part. I think that's really what is going on. They're embracing who they are, their gifts, and they're quite unapologetic. And they're going after their dreams and what they want in life. So I feel like I could talk for hours on this, right? We've got the hero's journey or the heroine's journey. That's part of it. And I might get into that later on in my lives. We'll see how long I keep these up. But this main character energy is so important because there's a few things, right? Can you imagine, right? We could get very esoteric with this, right? Are we even real? We're all just energy. The universe is a hologram. There's that idea that, the whole world is a stage and we're just these like little sort of actors in it. And, as you're going through life, people come into your life. It's like they're entering from the side of the stage and playing a part in this, moment that is your story, and then they leave again, right? The main character learns something, or they have a challenge, and then they move on to the next part of their journey, right? So I'm beginning more and more to see my life like that. People are in it for a reason, a season, a lifetime. They come in, and then you've got your NPCs, right? Your non-player characters who are sort of just these filler people characters in the world, but if you're not interacting with them, they're just kind of there, a bit like the sort of Truman Show, right? That guy in the waves in the garden and these moments. And there's a few people I've sort of identified as being NPCs in my life. And there's a guy that walks, this lovely black lab, but you know, I see him every day as an older man, and we wave and say hello and then carry on, right? But I always meet him at exactly the same crossroads almost every morning. And you know, he's kind of, we don't really say much else apart from maybe comment on the weather and say hello and off he goes again. But to me, he's kind of like a lovely, lovely man, but like an NPC, right? He's not really going to play a role in my life, but he's there every day in this weird Truman Show setup of life that we're in. And so the more that you can sort of see your life like that, and there's sort of, if we go a layer deeper, there's a sort of, there's a theory that things don't exist until you create them in your mind and go there, right? Like the rest, unless it's in your actual existence in this moment. If the world was, say, a giant virtual reality game, I listened to a whole excellent podcast on that by a virtual reality expert. I cannot remember what podcast it was on. Might have been JRE or Robert Edward Grant. I don't know. Anyway, I listened to a whole podcast by he was into quantum physics and also virtual reality, and his two worlds had kind of met in this moment. And where quantum physics is taking us is, and showing us that, you know, we are all energy, and really we are sort of creating the world around us as we move through it. And I've experienced that on a very visceral level at moments in Glastonbury. Like I was just like walking through the town and things were just happening. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the Matrix. It's happening right now. I'm in a flow story. Synchronicities are going wild, and I could physically sort of feel the world unfolding as I walked through it. It was a really weird, odd experience, but really cool. So this sense of the main character energy, what if, right? What if nothing else, you know, really, but also if nothing else sort of really mattered, or it wasn't, if this isn't really like real, but you are observing it through that lens of sort of watching how it all plays out, right? Really, a really interesting way to look at it. If you were watching your life as a movie, how would you feel watching your main character play out their story, right? Would you be annoyed? You know, when somebody in a movie is just not doing the thing and you can see that they have all these opportunities, or the person that they should be with, or, you know, they've got all this stuff going on and they're miserable or not taking action, and you're just like, come on, let's go, like do it. Like you want this main character, you want them to do well, live up to their potential, have a brilliant life, right? We're excited, we want to champion them on, right? So imagine what your audience, right? Imagine that if they are in the celestial realms, are watching your movie play out, or maybe your higher self is up there watching this version of your movie play out, right? I also believe we're living in many parallel universes at the same time. Past, present, future all exist at the same time, right? But in the sort of, we'll bring it back to the sort of way that we can sort of imagine it, right? Because all that is so beyond what our brains can really handle. So how would your team be feeling if they were watching you playing out your main character energy, right? And there are moments where I think, oh God, they're going to be like shaking their heads, or if I've been, you know, making excuses or I'm not taking responsibility for things, right? They're going to be screaming on the other side at you, like, come on, let's go, right? Or if you've had that little like idea or nudge or dream that you've had and you're not doing it, what is your team, what would they be screaming at you on the other side, right? So the invitation really is to live into your main character energy. I remember when I was maybe 22, 23, I was working as an accountant in Glasgow, and I bought my own flat, and I was living on the third floor, and I was sort of, you know, up these 3 flights of stairs, locked in my flat. And occasionally on the weekend, I wouldn't leave my flat, right? I'd be exhausted. I was, well, at the beginning, I was working 2 jobs, and then I was just studying for accounting exams as well. I was exhausted, and I'd either be studying or tired and trying to recuperate before another week or whatever. So I remember I felt very safe away up in my little flat in the middle of Glasgow. But I remember thinking, and I was also watching a lot of Sex and the City at the time, right? But I remember thinking, my exciting life that I want is not going to come find me in my 3rd floor flat in Glasgow. It's just not going to come knocking on my door. Like, it's never going to happen. Nothing wild is going to change unless I do something drastic and go and seek my exciting life. If I go and seek being the main character in my own life, right? So I packed up, moved to Bermuda, and the rest is history. We're not going to focus on that. So several years into being in this journey that I went on, I would say at the beginning it wasn't even intentionally about self-discovery. It was looking for an adventure. It was wanting to live a big life, do something exciting, go to some of these places that I'd seen on TV. That was really kind of the start of my journey, my own story, my own movie that I was creating. A little part of me also was looking for something more, right? I was like, this is not it. Being an accountant is not it. And very early on, I made a decision to start going and experiencing all the world wonders. So I thought, maybe they have the answers. Maybe I will find the secret if I go to these world wonders. And so that started quite early on in my life. In my 20s, I was living this corporate life, partying a heck of a lot. But then on my holidays, I would go to Machu Picchu. I would go to China. I would go to India, to the Taj Mahal, to Angkor Wat, the Great Wall of China. I would go on these crazy big adventures. I remember my work colleagues being like, where are you going this time? Like, I just thought I was totally bonkers because I was sort of in my 20s and living otherwise quite a normal and party life. So that was the beginning of it. And I remember being home one year and my friend and I went to the cinema, and it was to see Eat, Pray, Love. Right? I'm sure most of you've all heard of it. You've probably read the book, watched the movie, and, she goes to Italy and eats with abandon. She goes to India, to the ashram, and prays and tries to sort of discover herself with spirituality. Then she goes to Bali and has the big romance and, goes to the Bali healer and all of that stuff, right? It's a wonderful movie. And I remember my friend turning to me, and she was living a more conventional life. She'd got married quite young, had a couple of kids, was still in her corporate role. And she just looked at me and she was like, that's you, isn't it? That's like your life. And I was like, yes, it kind of is, right? So we're living these, one moment. So I was kind of living my Eat, Pray, Love journey. I've spent the months in Italy, eating away to my heart's content, dating Italians and having a big, cool adventure. I've done the India thing, right? Looking for something. I have been to every spiritual event and shaman and healer and all that kind of stuff. I did that moment. Haven't quite been in an ashram, but I've done lots and lots of this spiritual exploration. And I've had the months in Bali as well. I've even been to the Bali healer that she goes to in the movie and, had that moment, right? So I really did the Eat, Pray, Love thing at the beginning, and that felt like, not intentionally again, it just kind of happened and unfolded that way. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, yes. And my friend pointed out, I was like, I'm kind of doing that. Yeah, I get it. But it's shifted and it's morphed. I don't feel like I'm in an Eat, Pray, Love movie anymore. I'm like, tick that box. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the freaking Truman Show, right? That's kind of how it feels. But more than that, in recent years, I have been living in a Dan Brown movie, right? It couldn't get it feels like it couldn't get much closer for me than that, right? And if you're not familiar with Dan Brown, he wrote The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and one that I'm not so familiar with called Inferno, but it also hits the frickin' spot, right? I feel like my life is definitely reflecting some of the plot lines of these movies. So in The Da Vinci Code, again, I haven't watched it for forever, but this like Dan Brown storyline has been sort of swirling around in my head as the best way to try and describe what the heck I've been up to for the last 6-7 years. So after my Eat, Pray, Love moment, right, and I did all the finding myself, and I spent months in Bali and Thailand and all that kind of good stuff. I used to go to those different places. I was always following my intuition, a little nudge. I didn't always understand. I'd go somewhere for as long as I felt, and then I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, I'm complete here, I'm finished, and I'd go to the next place. And I was doing that just in a quite a surrendered way. I didn't really understand why I was going where I was going. If you ever looked at the map that I have taken going around the world, it makes no sense. Sometimes I'm over there, I'm back here, I do a whole circuit of the world, then I'm back to the next place. It makes no sense, right? Like the journey doesn't add up. I don't know how many times I've flown around the world, many times, backwards and forwards, and having lived all over the place. So the journey doesn't always necessarily make sense. And if somebody, you would be like, why did you do that? That really isn't adding up, Joe. And I get that. So and I didn't understand it, but I just was going with it, right? What else am I going to do, right? It seems like a good idea. I was allowing that to lead my journey and how it unfolded. And then I started experiencing more and more synchronicities. So these things that have become, to me, flow stories, moments when I am living in the divine flow of life and feeling very guided and aligned. And I find that is very, it can be very potent when you're traveling, because you've thrown yourself into the wind, and you have more opportunities, in a sense, I feel, to meet random people, to meet your next healer, go on the next adventure, go to the next place. And I just sort of followed that along quite naturally, and really enjoyed it. So from those synchronicities, I'd be like, oh, and they're the little pieces of the puzzle that you often don't even notice, but I'm sure you've noticed the repeating numbers, the symbols, right? For you, it might be a butterfly or a dragonfly or something like that, right? But when you're having a sort of spiritual awakening, as I was in this whole process, you start to see signs. The universe works and speaks to us through signs and symbolism, and that is reflected in a whole bunch of things that go on in the world. So when I'm living in my Dan Brown movie, I start to follow the signs and the symbols, and it takes me to these, just like in the movie, it takes me to different sacred sites, a bit like how I'd been going to all the world wonders when I was younger. But this was taking me to specific islands, specific churches, a sacred site, a stone circle, all of this kind of stuff. And it was very clear where I had to go. Sometimes I would just wake up and it was just very, very clear where I had to go. So very quick story about my trip to Stonehenge. I was in London. I was exhausted. I was over the travel. I really had absolutely no intention. I kind of knew I was supposed to go to Stonehenge, but I didn't have any plan. I'd sort of loosely Googled it, but from where I was in London, it was going to take me probably 3.5-4 hours, multiple trains and buses. And I was like, oh, that is exhausting. I've traveled so much. I'm done. And I said sort of out loud at least in my head, universe, if you want me to go to Stonehenge and continue on this wild Dan Brown movie of my life, I want to be picked up and taken there. So I just said that, and I left it, and I just decided that was the end of it. That day, or the following day, I had a message on Facebook from a guy that I had worked with earlier. He's a sound engineer, and I'd worked with him for a little while. And he messaged me and he said, hey Joe, and he was American. And when I connected with him, he was in America and I was in Australia, and I didn't know anything otherwise. And he messaged me, he was like, hey, let's connect, let's have a chat. And I was like, okay, whatever. So we jump on a Zoom call and he's like, hey, what's up? What have you been doing? I've just been to Greece and Egypt, and I'm in London. And I was like, oh, wow, cool. I'm in London. And he was like, yeah, that's so crazy. I'm thinking of going to Glastonbury, not Glastonbury, Stonehenge this week. And I was like, oh, really? That's so funny. I said, I was just looking at how to get to Stonehenge from where I am in London. And he was like, do you know what? I'll pick you up. And it was those exact words I needed to hear. He's like, let's go together on the solstice. And I was like, oh, okay. That's all I need. And it turned out where we were in London, I did go and get a train, but then he and his friends picked me up from that train station, so I didn't have to go and take another couple of buses to get to Stonehenge. And the two of us went into Stonehenge on the solstice. This was back in 2018, I think. And he had just been recording the sound and oming in the Great Pyramids of Egypt. So he was a sound engineer, and he brought this oming and the sound with him to Stonehenge. And I sat there and I opened the Akashic records of Stonehenge. He's oming and playing this music from Egypt. And I did this big, beautiful healing through the Akashic records of Stonehenge. And we sat there and we did our process, and we had our crystals and our smudge and all this kind of stuff. And the healing, the message that I got through the records for Stonehenge was about how they were in pain and stress and all this kind of stuff. And I remember I put a big bubble above Stonehenge, and as far as I went up, I also went below. So I was protecting it in this great big bubble of energy, and closed the records and left. And I ended up, then his friend picked us up again, took us back to their house. And as I walked in, we met this his friend's wife, who looks at me and goes, I know you. And I was like, excuse me? And she's like, oh, we're friends on Facebook. And I was like, of course we are. And we just did this lovely evening. I had a meal with them. We were like old friends. It was just incredible. I didn't know I knew anyone down there, but here I am. They offered, I stayed over at their house, and I went back to London the next day. So it couldn't have been easier, more guided, more beautiful. But I had to go to Stonehenge, and I got the sign that I needed, was that specific word, pick you up. And so off we went. It later turns out that the councillor, the government or whoever was, there's big traffic problems around Stonehenge because it's so busy, that they had been trying to plan, they were going to build a road underneath and tunnel underneath Stonehenge. And I just knew that was going to mess with all the energetics of this beautiful sacred site. And so part of my contribution to being there was to help with this big bubble of energy. And they've been fighting it ever since. And I believe just in the last year or so, they've sort of gone to court multiple times, and the planning has been knocked back. And I believe they've just finally given up and said, all right, we'll not build this tunnel underneath here. But it was like the sacred sites was crying out for help. And I am not the only one that does that or goes there or whatever. There are loads of spiritual people that go there and help and bring their energy and, do their piece of the puzzle for our greater spiritual planetary awakening and to help create harmony with these sites. So these sites are very important. They're energetic vortexes or portals. Stonehenge is the heart. It's the heart chakra of the earth, and it's also kind of the third eye has been like floating as a chakra of the earth, and it is believed to be around Stonehenge at the moment. But I have a cool bit of the puzzle coming up around that. So to protect the heart chakra of the world, I had to get my ass to Stonehenge, right? So this is part of this. I'm like, what? I don't understand, but I'm doing it. I'm guided and I'm following it. And so just like the body has chakras, your crown, your third eye, your throat chakra, your heart chakra, etc. The earth has all of those chakras too. And just like a human, I can have a blocked throat chakra, so I'm not able to speak and express myself properly. The earth can also have a blocked throat chakra, and it needs to be healed as well. The throat chakra of the world is the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. So, next part of this. So each of these chakras, so in the human body, each of the chakras in our whole body has meridian lines. So if you've ever been for acupuncture or been for any kind of Chinese medicine, you'll see the charts. You have lines all over your body. And if you have any kind of blockage or anything in your lines, your body is not going to be functioning at its best. And so beautiful acupuncture goes in, pops the wee needles in, and shifts that energy and opens it up for you. It can relieve pain, promotes healing, all of this kind of good stuff. So joining up all of these earth chakras are ley lines, or the earth's meridian lines. It's the same thing. They're also sometimes called dragon lines or song lines or incarnation lines, right? They've got different names, but in different countries, right? In Australia, they call them song lines because the Aboriginal people would use sound and song along these lines to heal and communicate and all of that kind of good stuff, right? Which is really cool. In China, they call them dragon lines, and also in Scotland we have dragon lines, which we'll get to in a second. But in China, obviously they have a big connection to the dragon. They call them dragon lines. And so if you imagine what a dragon looks like, right? It's undulating, it's up and down. And that's kind of how energy moves. And energy will move along these lines in a sort of undulating pattern, right? So perhaps the dragon is real. Perhaps it is a symbol of energy and how energy moves. Who knows? So, just like the human can go for acupuncture or do EFT or any other kind of healing to clear the energy in their body and have it moving more freely, you also can do the same for the earth. And so I believe, as a little human who is guided and pulled to all these different places around the world, we act as mobile acupressure needles, right? And I believe that we each have a certain healing energy or frequency that we need to deliver to a certain place, or codes and information that we need to gather from these sacred places, right? I don't understand the full bird's eye view of this because it's so beyond the human ability to comprehend exactly what is happening. But I know, again, there are loads of us on this planetary healing mission that are drawn to very specific places at very specific times, and we can't exactly articulate why or what's going on. There was one summer, was it 2019, so many spiritual people I knew gravitated towards Greece. It was just, everybody was there. Everybody's in Greece, right? And I went there and I spent a month on a sacred island and did all this, did a whole bunch of ceremony and whatever there. And I remember when I was there, this girl that I met, I can't even remember where she was from, but she gave me this huge, big, beautiful, clear crystal quartz crystal with a double end. And she said, would you please deliver this to Roslin Chapel in Scotland? And I said, sure. I'd only just been there before. I discovered that my sister lived only 10 minutes away from Roslin Chapel. I thought Roslin Chapel was away in the borders, right? And because my life is now this Dan Brown movie, of course, Roslin Chapel is where they go to at the end of the Da Vinci Code. And it sort of led them there on this mission to find the sort of Holy Grail and the truth about Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And they go there and they see all the different signs and symbolism on the, in the church. And a lot of that symbolism in real life even proves that humans were around a lot longer before we imagine. And we've definitely discovered the US a lot earlier than we are told in our history story that we are told, right? So there is a lot of layers and depth to this history, and I very gladly took this little crystal along and I meditated with it. I said a prayer and I put it in a very strategic place that I was guided to help heal the ley line on this Roslin Chapel, which is the rose line, which is all about the heart, and to help connect it all the way back through Egypt, and also where that girl had come from. I think it was somewhere in France. I can't quite remember. She was European of some sort. I can't remember exactly where. So I'm off doing this with my crystal. My sister's like, oh my gosh, you're a bit mental. But I go back there again with my father, and we end up sort of accidentally down in the crypt of Rosslyn Chapel. I had this like crazy feeling of having been there in a past life, and like having this moment with my father down there. Very unusual. Anyway, so I keep with this Rosslyn Chapel connection in the Rose Line. A lot of my work seems to be sort of accidentally connected to the Rose Line. Of course, it's not an accident, right? So I get on very auspicious dates, because my sister lives there, I end up pulled to the Rose Line near Rosslyn Chapel on auspicious dates. So my little nephew was born on the summer solstice. He turned 6 on Friday. And so guess where I'm going? I'm going to the Rose Line on Friday, and I have done that most years since he was born for his birthday. So for whatever reason, this giant cosmic crazy story had my little nephew born on the summer solstice. And I end up on the Rose Line for these auspicious dates. I was also there for the eclipse, kind of by accident, right? I don't know. Anyway, weird and wonderful things. I don't know about the timing. I don't try to line it up. I just allow myself to be invited to different places. As a projector, that's how I operate. I'm open to invitations. And if I'm in my energy and my presence is invited to somewhere, I go there. And that is how it works. And I sort of pick up these signs and clues, and I'm sent on different kind of weird missions to different places. And I just go. I'm quite obedient to the call. I feel like it's filling some higher mission of my life that I'm on that I don't get. I don't always know why or whatever. But I'm always excited to go and see who I meet, or what happens, or what the energy's like, or what I'm drawn to do in these certain places. And there are so many more layers to this, because my tattoo links to Rosslyn Chapel and Glastonbury, and it's a whole nother story. But this is another of the signs and symbols that has taken me on a weird and wacky journey. But we'll maybe get into that. We do not have time for that one today. So with all that knowledge, in the past, I was just going to these places quite unconsciously. I would just go, and I didn't really know why or whatever. Fine, no problem. Now I have more of an awareness that there is a higher thing playing out, right? I now am in contact with a whole bunch of people that are also doing the same thing, and have become aware that they're doing it. They're not just randomly going places anymore. They know they're doing it. And I'm actually on a podcast. We're recording it on the solstice, of course, with this amazing girl who has done a whole ton of sacred travel, and that's her entirety of her podcast. It's actually called Sacred Travel. So I'm going to be on there, I don't know when it's coming out, but I'm going to be on there on Thursday sharing my story, and she has some great shares about this. So part of this beautiful story is that I don't feel so alone. I'm definitely not on my own. So many of my friends, so many of my podcast guests have been part of this journey as well. Past clients, friends, and we're all doing it, right? I'm not special or anything. Like, we're all on this mission, and it's so lovely when I can connect with people and they go, oh yeah, of course, yeah, I was drawn to this place and we went here and we had this experience. I'm like, oh great, it's not just me. Okay, wonderful. It's definitely, I'm not totally crazy. I'm not delusional that I'm living in this Dan Brown movie, right? It's actually a thing, right? It's been really amazing. So if you are interested in some of those stories, definitely check out my podcast. Maybe I'll link a couple of the key ones below, and I go into more detail about what it's all about on one of the podcasts as well. Okay, cut forward. So all of these, I mean, this is like the tiniest little thread through this story. There are so many layers, so many different missions and crazy things that I've been guided to do over the years. And I feel like everything has been stacking on top of each other, and it's leading to some sort of like conclusion, crescendo, something like that, right? Like, I thought my mission honestly was over when I came back to Scotland. I didn't really understand, because I was like, why am I in Scotland? I am stuck in one place. I've been on this big crazy journey, traveling all over the world, going to all these amazing places, and now I'm in Scotland, right? All right, let's just be honest. Because when you're from somewhere, you take it for granted and all of that good stuff. And when I left, when I was 23, I didn't really appreciate any of this stuff, right? I didn't see the sacredness. I didn't see the magic. I didn't see the beauty, really, right? It just was not what I was interested in. And so coming back, I'm like, oh my goodness, it is full of all of these beautiful sacred sites, stone circles, castles, you know, monuments, all of this stuff. I'm like, we're dripping in history, and I'd sort of missed the memo before, right? I just didn't get it or appreciate it. And Scotland is a place where the veil is thin, right? So when the veil is thin, you have an easier connection between heaven and earth, right? So you can connect with the other side, with the spirit realm, more easily. And that's a whole nother story. Anyway, so the veil is thin. So there is also specific dates on the calendar that the veil is even thinner, right? Like Halloween, for instance, literally all Hallows Eve, you know, we connect with the spirits on those specific dates. There's specific dates of the year that are even more potent, a bit like the solstice, right? But Scotland has this sort of this power, this story and this history that I had totally underestimated. And so I'm back here and I'm like, still a bit like, why am I here? Why am I still here? I came back because my dad wasn't well, and anyway, it's a whole nother thing. So what I understood is Scotland is at the absolute epicenter of this planetary grid work, elevation of consciousness moment in on the planet, in this moment, in this 3-year window. And I will tell you more about that in a second. And for me, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's why I'm here. That's why this is all so important. I've been just literally primed for this moment in history to be here at this time. And I had to go on this journey beforehand. I've been like prepped. I've been prepared. I've been sent on all these missions. I have all the right whatever codes or energy or whatever it is, I don't know, and I'm here in this moment. So end of last year, I was already having this like feeling that I wanted to run a retreat, but I was thinking, I'll do this retreat in Italy. Wouldn't that be wonderful, right? Who doesn't want to go to Italy? But I was there was something wasn't quite landing with it. And I remember I had a chat with my cousin, and she said, you should totally do one in Scotland. Why wouldn't you do one in Scotland? Scotland's amazing. We have amazing food and houses and castles and lodges. Why wouldn't you do it here? And I was like, good question. So I think part of that has been this sort of rejection of my Scottishness or my history, or not appreciating what the potency of Scotland and what is here and the importance of it. Anyway, so I decided in my head, okay, I'll do a retreat in Scotland. And I started researching places, and I found the perfect lodge, location, the sites I wanted to go visit and take people to. I was very clear on exactly where these places were. There is looking at this, again, my Dan Brown moment, right? There's a pentagram, the geometry of Scotland, there's a pentagram, and right at the centre of this pentagram, I just knew it had to be there. So I thought, right, we're going to centre this whole retreat around the centre of this pentagram, and whoever it comes needs to come here and be sort of seeded with this energy, bring their own healing codes that they've gathered from whatever they've been up to, consciously or unconsciously, and we need to go to these sacred sites on this retreat. I just had a feeling. I knew that's what we had to do. I was going to go to Loch Ness, a castle called Urquhart Castle that's on the side of Loch Ness. Very key in a minute. I'll explain why that's so important. Clava Cairns. I'd never heard of it before, but I was like, I need to take these people to Clava Cairns. It turns out, I didn't know this, but it was actually the inspiration for that moment in Outlander, you know, where the whole point of Outlander, when Claire goes through the stones and she touches a standing stone and she goes back in time. That was at Craignadah, but that doesn't exist. And so they actually took the inspiration for the Outlander stone circle from Clava Cairns. And it just so happens to be only a mile from Culloden, which was where there was a big battle. And it was also represented in Outlander in the movie. And on the morning of the battle, Jamie walks Claire back to Clava Cairns, or Craignadah, to go back through the stones to save her when she's pregnant, right? So maybe I'm living also kind of Outlander as well as Da Vinci. I don't know, it's wild. So anyway, I decided that's where we wanted to go. I'd been there as a child, again, weird, but I'd been there as a child, but I knew I wanted to take people back in this moment of time. Okay, so that was kind of all in my head. I've got it all jotted down. I've got a list of the sites. Everything is Outlander, but also important sacred moments in history of Scotland, right? And then, right, it's so weird. I know I sound crackers. Anyway, so then I'm listening to a podcast or a YouTube video. I love Pam Gregory. She's my favourite astrologer. She is so calm and kind and clear and doesn't whip you into a frenzy of fear of what's coming in the world, right? She's beautiful. You definitely check her out. But she did this interview with somebody I don't follow, I'd heard of, but I don't really follow, called Magenta Pixie. And the two of them sort of, from their different angles, Magenta like channels some being or something, and Pam is the astrologer, but they sort of line up and sort of talk about their what's happening, but like they sort of back each other up kind of accidentally on purpose, I suppose, but like they just share what's coming through, and then one goes, oh my gosh, that makes sense because of the astrology, and she goes, well, I channeled this and that backs up the astrology. And so it's a nice way to sort of see that these people are, it's connected and it makes sense, right, from different angles, right, which is really cool. I love to hear it. So I'm listening to this thing, and Magenta Pixie says, like, mentions Scotland, right? So of course I'm like, oh, what are they saying about Scotland? Little Scotland up here, right? So she said that, and I should probably go back and double check, listen again, but she said that a lot of the sacred sites and vortexes in Scotland had been closed and sealed off for a very, very long time. There had been some sort of block around these sites for a long time. And during the Lions Gate last summer in August 2023, these gates and vortexes and ley lines and dragon lines all opened. So that means it is a very potent, energetic time to be in those locations, and they are open until 2023. And I was like, oh my goodness, of course I'm in Scotland while this portal of energy has opened, that hasn't been available before this, right? This is bananas. Of course I'm here for this. And she also said that stone dragons were coming to life, and which I didn't fully understand, but I knew in this area that I want to take people to, there is a stone dragon fort, which was also an Outlander, but it's like a star fort, but it's a dragon, and it's in a dragon shape, so it's a dragon fort. And these are very key, again, energetic points that these forts were built on originally, right? Before you pretend what they're supposed to be nowadays or whatever, right? They've been there for a these are very ancient things, and a lot of them have been destroyed or covered up and all this kind of stuff. So again, my energy was being pulled there. I knew I needed to go to this place. So I was like, oh my goodness, so there's a dragon theme, we've got to go to these stones, and Loch Ness, and oh my goodness. Okay, so as if I'm not already convinced, but I didn't fully jump in and start organising it, so I already knew where I was going, had this information, but I was still sitting on it. And then I was at the gym in April. I remember this because it was the day before I went to visit my friend in Sweden, and I'm listening to a podcast at the gym, and it's Robert Edward Grant and Alex Ferrari, and I like both of their podcasts. I recommend both of them. So they're interviewing, or Robert's interviewing Alex, and Alex goes, yeah, well, you know, there's these places up in Scotland, nobody ever goes there, but like, yeah, no, they're kind of important. And so again, I'm like, oh, what are these? You know, my ears are like pricked up. I'm like, what are they talking about? So Alex goes on to say, oh yeah, there's these couple of places in Scotland. One is Urquhart Castle and the other is Clavacairns, and you know, they're really important, but like nobody ever goes up there, nobody ever knows about them or has heard of them. And I'm like, I was doing like a hamstring curl because I remember the moment, and I was like, oh, that's where I'm supposed to do my retreat. That was where I've got my notes. I pull up the notes on my phone. I'm like, oh my God, Urquhart Castle, Clavacairns. That's what these guys are talking about. This is nuts. And Robert Edward Grant goes, oh my gosh, my family had something to do with Urquhart Castle back in the day. I think I tried to buy it one day. And I was like, of course you did. And then he said something about it matching the geometry of Orion and had links back to Egypt again. And I was like, of course, these places are so important and connected. And I was like, oh, why wouldn't it be there? So I'm listening to all this. I know the Scottish pentagram has the same geometry as the pyramids as well. And I was like, wow, okay, this is the absolute sign I need to get this retreat going, right? Now, all of my like favourite people are talking about it. They're talking about Scotland. They're talking about these key points very specifically. Like we are, you know, it feels very clear to me that this is exactly bang on where we're supposed to go. And normally I don't need this much confirmation, but you know, I'm you know, drinking it all in. And then about a week ago, 2 people sent me a reel by Robert Edward Grant again and Matthias de Stefano. So at that point, when he was talking to Alex in April, Robert Edward Grant had never been to this Urquhart Castle that he claimed that his family had something to do with. Anyway, a couple months later, he's there with Matthias de Stefano, and I've heard him on a bunch of podcasts. He is somebody who is very tuned in and remembers all of his past lives in like great detail. Really interesting guy. And so the 2 of them are there doing a live stream basically from Urquhart Castle talking about the energies and what's going on. And I'm like, oh my goodness, of course they are. So they talk about Loch Ness, and it is a very deep, you know, loch, and it's probably apart from Loch Lomond, it might be the most well-known one in Scotland because of the Loch Ness Monster, right? And you know, it's a very tourist thing. Lots of people go there looking for Nessie. I went as a kid looking for Nessie, all that kind of stuff. And this Urquhart Castle is like a ruined castle, but it's right on the banks of Loch Ness. And they start talking about the geometry of it and how Loch Ness is the pineal gland of Europe. So your pineal gland is where you have your spiritual connection. It can get blocked, it can get calcified, and so, you know, you're less able to connect with your higher self, spiritual stuff, the universe, whatever. So it's a bit like our antenna, right? It's our antenna. And so if it's blocked, we can't always hear our intuition, we can't listen, we get disconnected from our soul or our soul purpose and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of people are trying to awaken their pineal gland, which is like your third eye, right? So you're, basically. So, right. So he says Loch Ness represents the pineal gland, and I was mind blown. And so all of these people and this opening of Loch Ness and the portals and the vortexes of Scotland is so important because it is helping humanity awaken. So humanity and the planet is having a massive spiritual awakening, and we need to activate the pineal gland, which is Loch Ness, right? I happen to be canoe down Loch Ness as a child, as a teenager. So I've been taken to that point multiple times by spirit, by whatever, and spent time there. And the guy, he said, well, what about Nessie, what about the Loch Ness Monster? And he said, well, it's not really Loch Ness Monster. It's a representation of the water dragon. And that is all about going to the depths of your consciousness and deep transformation. So you have to go into the depths of your soul, of your spirit, to heal, to crack open, to, you know, rise up and heal. and this pineal gland needs healed, and you've got to go to the depths of beyond to find the spark of life and creation and heal it, right? And I was like, ooh, this is all quite profound. And I had the awareness, I was like, oh wow, I suppose again that dragon, that undulating line, it's kind of like our DNA structure, right? It looks a bit like that. And I was like, maybe it's also, if you're awakening your pineal gland, maybe there's like awakening of the Kundalini energy as well, right? When you open your pineal gland. And I saw a video today of Joe Dispenza talking about exactly that, right? As the pineal gland awakens, then your Kundalini energy awakens, and it is referred to as a serpent, and it kind of is the energy that fires up your back, right? So I was like, oh, I'm supposed to take this group of people to Loch Ness to awaken all of the pineal glands of ourselves and the world, and help humanity raise in its consciousness. What on earth? And then Matthias continues on about, he was talking about Switzerland and the connection to Switzerland, and it's how it's the heart. It's also this heart thing, but it's got, obviously people watches are made in Switzerland, right? The best watches in the world are made in Switzerland. And so there's this time element, and I was like, okay. And then he says, well, of course, this Urquhart Castle represents Orion's belt. I've had a very strong connection to Orion my whole life. I don't know why, whatever. But that is the same representation as the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. They are in the formation of Orion. But then he says that the clavicairns have the geometry of the Giza Plateau, so this stone circle. And he said that he feels like he needs to come back to that place in 2026 when the vortexes are closing. He didn't know that part. And he wants to take a whole bunch of people there in 2026. But I feel like I'm supposed to take people there now, before he does whatever he's doing in 2026, because that's when they're closing. So, and this piece about time and the energy of the Giza Plateau at the clavicairns, there's something that needs to happen in that point, right? Because so Claire went back in time at the clavicairns, right? So there's something to do with time and healing time and linking the clavicairns and Egypt and Switzerland. I don't know. But this is the, hey Asia, this is the Dan Brown shit. This is why it gets so bananas. I am like following these messages and signs, whether it comes through podcasts or meeting people or being invited to certain places. And I'm like following this story and trusting and trying to follow this energy flow of where I'm supposed to go, what I'm supposed to do, where I'm supposed to bring people. And that has all culminated in hosting and having a retreat in September in Scotland at this very point at the centre of the... yes, it is live now, Asia. You've found me, you've caught me. So it's all happening at the centre of this pentagram in September 21st to 27th. And I'm very excited about that. So I don't know who's supposed to come with me. I don't know who is going to feel the call. Maybe you are well aware you've been on a planetary grid work adventure. Maybe you also feel like your work is all adding up to helping awaken the consciousness of humanity. I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch, right? Maybe you have no idea that you've ever been anywhere on purpose, but this is intriguing and it sounds interesting. And maybe you're an Outlanders fan and would love to go and do some cool shit with time in the time traveling stone circle, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully we'll all, I don't know, make it through the time portal. Who knows? I love it. Asia's saying she feels tuning into the lands and called to go to places and planting the seeds and receiving, right? See, that's exactly it, right? You get it. I love it. I love that, Asia. So yeah, some of us know what we're up to and know it's important, and you'll come to Scotland in the next couple of years, whether it's with me or independently, and you need to go to those places, you will just know that that is an important thing that you need to do. maybe you're intrigued, I hope, if you've made it this far. So it's going to be a regular retreat, kind of. We're going to stay in a beautiful lodge, very close to Urquhart Castle, very close to this pineal gland, the Loch Ness. And it's going to be a combination of inner work, meditations, activations, visiting all these sacred sites, doing some of the energy work at these sacred sites, feeling into what's coming through. All of my work happens in flow. Doesn't mean there's no plan, but it means we go with the flow, and we are available to see what's happening and what's coming through, right? If we know we need to stay somewhere a bit longer, we'll stay somewhere a bit longer. If we have to leave, we leave, right? If we're having a moment, whatever, right? So it becomes very flexible, very responsive to the energy, what we need in the moment. And I believe that you will get exactly what you need from this retreat. It might be, and because of this, the depth of Loch Ness, right? And there's an opportunity for deep healing and deep transformation within that. So my work, I read the Akashic Records, I do a lot of work with that, and so we let that guide us as well. So we work with you individually and in the group setting to get whatever breakthrough you need to be able to go on and live out your full purpose, right? Whether it's expanding your business or whatever that looks like. So there will be moments of kind of a business mastermind vibe, but it will be specific one-on-one time for each guest, and whatever they need to work on will be worked on within that time. So it might be a deep transformational moment, it might be clearing blocks, it might be revising your branding and your messaging, or your plan for the next year. I don't know what you're going to need, but whatever that is, whatever your intention is that you come with, we will work on that specifically for you. So as you walk away feeling like you got what you came here for, and hopefully so much more. So there'll be a nice balance between, we won't be out at sacred sites the whole week. It's 6 nights, 5 full days of experience. So we won't be out in the wilds the whole time. Obviously there's going to be some weather moments or whatever. So we'll work with that and around that. And so I'd reckon roughly half of the time will be deep in process and working through things, and roughly half the time we'll probably be out exploring all of these sites. They're all sacred in their own right, ancient, and they just so happen to all be Outlander related, filming locations or part of the deeper story. So if you're up for it, let me know. I have a wonderful lodge, beautiful. It's gonna be very Scottish. Also, if you just want for a Scottish experience, we're going to weave in a lot of very Scottish. It's not going to be cheesy Scottish, it's going to be legit good Scottishness. From fresh, local, beautiful food, private chef, all that kind of good stuff. All the good Scottishness is going to be part of the experience. So if you might already know what that's like, you might even be Scottish, but if you're from overseas, you haven't been to Scotland, we will make it a very Scottish experience, but in a nice way. Not in a real tacky way, So that will be wonderful, and it'll just be a really fantastic week, and I am so looking forward to it. So if you are interested, I'm more than happy to shoot you over the details. If you want to jump on a call and ask questions, see if it's something that would work for you. There's no prior experience required, right? You don't need to be super spiritual. You just need to be curious and open and excited and want to be part of it and part of the group and all that kind of good stuff. So if you're not into Outlander, that's also okay, right? These sites are historically important and interesting anyway, and you can vibe more with the spiritual aspects of things, right? So it doesn't have to be all one or the other. If you don't want to necessarily work on your business, that's okay too. If you want it to be all about your spiritual alignment and awakening and personal development, perfect, right? So you get to choose what you're working on, what's coming up for you, what's present, and we will meet you exactly where you're at, and take it from there. So if that sounds interesting, let me know and I will shoot you over the details, and we can jump on a call if you like. All right. Thank you so much for being here for day 6 of the Quantum Leap experiment. I've already know what my topic is for tomorrow. I'm excited for that. And I will see you here tomorrow. We're doing this every day until the solstice. And then I might keep going. I'm going to see. I'm feeling like it's doing me good. I feel like it's good for me to be speaking and showing up. And it's keeping me really accountable, which I love. And I'm actually enjoying it. So there's that. So I want to send you all so much love, and I will see you tomorrow. I know this is probably really long. I don't even know how long I've been on, but it is just such a wild story. And I really wanted to try and sort of tie it all up and make it make some kind of maybe sense. I don't know. Anyway, sending you so much love. I'll speak to you tomorrow.